The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door like a secret too heavy to knock. Ellie, 24, picked it up, her fingers trembling as she recognized her mother's sharp, slanted handwriting. It wasn't the reunion she'd prayed for since that rainy night 6 years ago when her mother walked out, leaving only silence after Ellie whispered, "I'm gay." Ellie stood frozen in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, the city's hum fading as she tore open the envelope. Inside, a single sentence. "I'll be at your play next month, Eleanor." No apology, no warmth, just her mother's name, Margaret, signed like a contract. Ellie's heart lurched. Her mother, who hadn't spoken to her since she was 18, was coming to see her perform. Not just any performance, but the one where Ellie, an aspiring playwright, would bare her soul on stage, telling the story of her love for Sarah, her fiancé, in a play called Light Through Cracks. Sarah burst through the door, her blonde hair catching the afternoon light, a grocery bag swinging from her arm. "Ellie, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice, warm and steady, pulled Ellie back. At 25, Sarah was the anchor Ellie never knew she needed. Funny, fierce, and unapologetically herself. They'd met 3 years ago at a poetry slam, where Sarah's words about loving freely in a world that judges had left Ellie breathless. Now they were building a life together, planning a wedding, and facing the world hand in hand. But Margaret's return threatened to unravel it all. Ellie handed Sarah the letter, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's coming." Sarah's eyes scanned the page, her jaw tightening. She knew the story, how Margaret, a devout woman from a small Ohio town, had called Ellie's truth a sin, packed a bag, and left her daughter to fend for herself. Ellie's father, Tom, had stayed, supportive but quiet, unable to bridge the gap Margaret's absence left. "Why now?" Sarah asked, tossing the letter onto the counter. "After all this time, why show up for your play?" Ellie shook her head, her brown eyes clouded with fear and hope. The play was personal, a love letter to Sarah woven with the pain of her mother's rejection. It was set to debut at a small theater festival in Manhattan, a chance for Ellie to prove herself as a writer. But now, the thought of her mother in the audience felt like a spotlight burning too bright. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk surrounded by crumpled drafts, her laptop glowing with the script she'd poured her heart into. The play wasn't just about love, it was about surviving the people who were supposed to love you back. She remembered the day she came out, her mother's face hardening, the door slamming as rain poured outside. Ellie had been 18, scared and alone, her dreams of being a writer overshadowed by the loss of her mother's love. She'd moved to New York, worked odd jobs, and met Sarah, who taught her that love could be a safe place. But Margaret's letter reopened old wounds, threatening the peace Ellie had fought for. The next morning, Sarah found Ellie staring out the window, coffee untouched. "We don't have to let her ruin this," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around Ellie. "This play is yours. It's ours. She doesn't get to take that away." Ellie nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. Could she face her mother on stage, knowing the woman who left her would be watching her declare her love for Sarah to the world? Over the next few weeks, rehearsals consumed Ellie's days. The theater, a cozy space with creaky seats and dim lights, became her sanctuary. Her cast, a tight-knit group of actors, brought her words to life. The lead, Mia, played a character inspired by Ellie, a young woman navigating love and loss. The role of her partner, drawn from Sarah, was played by a fiery actress named Lena, whose chemistry with Mia made the stage electric. But every line felt heavier now, knowing Margaret would be there, judging every word. Ellie's father called one evening, his voice soft over the phone. "She's been talking about you," Tom said. "She's changed, Ellie. Not enough, maybe, but she's trying." Ellie wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing. She'd spent years rebuilding herself after Margaret's rejection. Could she let her mother back in, even for one night? As the festival approached, Ellie and Sarah leaned on each other. Sarah, ever the optimist, planned their wedding with a contagious joy, picking flowers, tasting cakes, dreaming of a future where they'd be enough for each other. But Ellie's mind kept drifting to the letter, to the woman who'd shaped her pain. Would Margaret see the love in her play, or only the daughter she'd failed? The night before the performance, Ellie stood in the empty theater, staring at the stage. Her play was more than art. It was her truth, a story of resilience and love that refused to be silenced. She thought of Sarah, her laughter, her strength, and the life they were building. And she thought of her mother, a shadow from her past, now stepping back into her light. Tomorrow, Ellie would face her, not as the scared girl left behind, but as a woman who'd found her voice. The theater buzzed with anticipation, a low hum of voices filling the air as the crowd settled into their seats. Ellie stood backstage, her heart pounding so loud she swore it echoed through the walls. Tonight her play, Light Through Cracks, would bare her soul to strangers, and to her mother, somewhere in the darkness beyond the stage lights. Sarah squeezed her hand, her green eyes steady. "You've got this," she whispered, her voice a lifeline. Ellie nodded, but her stomach churned. She peeked through the curtain, scanning the crowd. Was Margaret out there already, her face stern, her arms crossed? Ellie hadn't seen her in 6 years, but she could still picture her mother's sharp cheekbones, her graying hair pulled tight in a bun, her eyes that used to soften but hadn't since Ellie's truth broke them apart. The lights dimmed, and the stage manager called for places. Ellie took her spot in the wings, clutching her script like a shield. The play began with Mia, the character inspired by Ellie, alone on stage, her voice trembling as she spoke of a love she feared would cost her everything. The words were Ellie's, drawn from the ache of her past. Each line felt like peeling back her skin, exposing the raw truth of her life. As the first act unfolded, Ellie's nerves began to settle. The audience laughed, gasped, leaned forward in their seats. Mia and Lena's chemistry lit up the stage, their love story unfolding in tender glances and quiet confessions. But then a scene hit too close to home. A mother, played by an actress named Claire, rejecting her daughter for loving a woman. The dialogue was sharp, cutting, drawn from Ellie's memory of that rainy night. "You're choosing this over family," Claire's character spat, and Ellie's throat tightened. She glanced at Sarah, who stood nearby, her face unreadable. Backstage between scenes, Ellie's mind raced. What was Margaret thinking out there? Was she seeing herself in Claire's cold words? Or was she unmoved, still clinging to the beliefs that tore them apart? Ellie's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her father. "She's here. Front row, left side." Ellie's breath caught. Front row. No escaping her mother's gaze now. The second act began, and the play shifted to hope, to Mia finding love despite the pain. Lena's character, inspired by Sarah, was a burst of light, funny, bold, unapologetic. The audience adored her, their laughter filling the theater. Ellie stole another glance at the crowd, spotting her mother at last. Margaret sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly, her face a mask. Ellie's heart sank. Was she here to judge, to condemn, or to finally listen? After the show, the cast took their bows and the applause roared. Ellie stepped onto the stage, her legs shaky, as the director introduced her as the writer. The crowd cheered, but Ellie's eyes locked on her mother. Margaret didn't clap, didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. For a moment their gazes held, and Ellie felt 18 again, small and scared. Then Sarah's hand found hers, grounding her, and she remembered who she was now. A woman who'd built a life worth celebrating. The lobby was chaos after the show, with people crowding the cast for photos and praise. Ellie stayed close to Sarah, her anchor in the storm. Then she saw her mother approaching, moving through the crowd like a ghost. Margaret was older now, her face lined with years Ellie hadn't witnessed. Her eyes, though, were the same, piercing, unyielding. "Eleanor," Margaret said, her voice low, formal. Ellie braced herself, expecting a lecture, a judgment. But Margaret only said, "It was powerful." The words hung between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Ellie wanted to scream, to ask why she'd left, why she'd waited 6 years to show up. But before she could speak, Margaret turned and disappeared into the crowd. Sarah pulled Ellie close. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but fierce. Ellie nodded, though she wasn't sure. The play had been a triumph, but her mother's presence felt like a wound reopened. That night, back in their apartment, Ellie sat on the couch, staring at the letter again. "I'll be at your play." Why had Margaret come? To make peace, or to remind Ellie of the distance between them? The next morning, Ellie woke to a text from her father. "She wants to talk. Give her a chance." Ellie's heart twisted. She'd spent years imagining this moment, but now it felt too big, too raw. Sarah, ever practical, suggested they meet on neutral ground, a coffee shop somewhere public. Ellie agreed, but dread pooled in her stomach. What could her mother say that would undo the past? They met at a small cafe in Williamsburg, the kind with mismatched chairs and too loud music. Margaret was already there, sitting stiffly with a black coffee. Ellie slid into the seat across from her, Sarah by her side. For a moment no one spoke. Then Margaret cleared her throat. "I didn't know," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know how much I hurt you." Ellie's breath caught. Was this an apology or something else? She waited, her hands trembling under the table. Margaret's eyes flicked to Sarah, then back to Ellie. "Your play, it made me see things. I'm not saying I understand, but I'm here." It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall between them. For the first time in years, Ellie felt a flicker of hope. The cafe's air felt thick, the weight of Margaret's words lingering like steam from her untouched coffee. Ellie stared at her mother, searching for the woman who'd raised her, who'd once braided her hair and read her bedtime stories. That woman was gone, replaced by someone older, quieter, her eyes carrying a mix of guilt and uncertainty. Sarah's hand rested on Ellie's knee under the table, a silent reminder of her strength. "Why now?" Ellie finally asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "You left me. You didn't call, didn't write for 6 years. Why show up now?" The question hung heavy, demanding an answer Margaret seemed unprepared to give. Margaret's fingers tightened around her mug. "I saw the poster for your play," she said. "Your name, your story, I couldn't stay away." Her voice cracked and Ellie caught a glimpse of something raw, regret, maybe, or shame. "I didn't know how to face you after what I did." Ellie's chest ached. She wanted to believe her mother, but trust was a bridge burned long ago. Sarah spoke up, her tone sharp but calm. "You hurt her, Mrs. Thompson. You left her when she needed you most." Ellie glanced at Sarah, grateful for her fire. Margaret flinched but didn't look away. "I know," she said softly. "I was wrong. I thought I was protecting my faith, but I lost my daughter." The admission landed like a stone, heavy and undeniable. Ellie's mind flashed to the play, to the scene where Mia's mother walked away, leaving her daughter to face the world alone. Writing it had been catharsis, a way to process the pain. But now, with Margaret sitting across from her, the pain felt fresh, as if no time had passed. "You didn't just leave," Ellie said, her voice breaking. "You made me feel like I was wrong for being me." Margaret's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. "I was raised to believe certain things," she said. "When you told me, I panicked. I didn't know how to be your mother anymore." Ellie wanted to scream that love shouldn't need a rulebook, but Sarah's hand tightened, grounding her. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Margaret continued. I want to try." The conversation ended without resolution, just a promise to meet again. Ellie left the cafe feeling raw, her emotions a tangle of anger and hope. Sarah held her hand as they walked back to their apartment, the Brooklyn streets alive with evening light. "You don't have to decide anything now," Sarah said. "You get to choose what she gets to be in your life." Over the next few days, Ellie threw herself into wedding plans, a welcome distraction. She and Sarah visited venues, laughing over cheesy decorations and dreaming of a day that would be theirs alone. But Margaret's shadow lingered. Ellie kept replaying her mother's words. "I want to try." What did that mean? Could she trust it? A week later, Ellie's phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. "Can we talk again?" Ellie hesitated, then agreed to meet at a park near her father's house in Ohio. It meant a weekend trip, a chance to see her dad too. Sarah insisted on coming, her presence a quiet strength. The drive was long, filled with music and shared silences, but Ellie's nerves grew with every mile. The park was quiet, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. Margaret was waiting on a bench, her coat wrapped tightly around her. She stood when she saw Ellie, her expression softer than before. "Thank you for coming," she said. Ellie nodded, unsure what to say. Sarah stayed close, her hand brushing Ellie's arm. They walked, the conversation stilted at first. Margaret asked about the play, about Ellie's life in New York. Ellie answered cautiously, guarding her heart. Then Margaret stopped, turning to face her. "I've been going to a new church," she said. "They talk about love differently. It's made me think about you, about us." Ellie's breath caught. Was her mother changing? Or was this just another fleeting hope? Sarah, ever observant, chimed in. "Ellie's built a life she's proud of. She's not the scared kid you left." Margaret nodded, her eyes on Ellie. "I see that," she said. "Your play showed me that." For the first time, Ellie felt her mother might actually see her. Not as a sin, but as a person. Back in New York, Ellie poured her confusion into her writing. She started a new script, one about reconciliation, about the messy work of rebuilding broken bonds. Sarah read her drafts, offering feedback with her usual mix of humor and insight. "You're writing your way through this," she said one night, kissing Ellie's forehead. "That's your power." As the wedding date approached, Ellie faced a decision. Invite Margaret or keep her at a distance. She talked it over with her father, who'd been her rock through the years. "She's trying, Ellie," he said. "It's not perfect, but it's a start." Ellie wasn't sure she was ready, but the idea of her mother witnessing her love for Sarah, not just on stage but in real life, felt like a chance to rewrite their story. Ellie stood in the bridal shop, staring at her reflection in a flowing white dress. The mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, strong, radiant, in love. Sarah, in a tailored suit, grinned from behind her, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You look like you're about to conquer the world," Sarah teased, adjusting Ellie's veil. But even in this moment of joy, Ellie's thoughts drifted to Margaret. Would she come to the wedding? Could she? The invitation sat unsent on Ellie's desk, a single card holding the weight of 6 years. She'd written it carefully, her words simple but deliberate. "We'd love for you to be there." Every time she thought of mailing it, her stomach knotted. Sarah, sensing her hesitation, never pushed. "It's your call," she said one evening, as they sat cross-legged on their couch, pizza boxes scattered around. "But whatever you decide, I'm here." Ellie's play had gained traction after the festival, with local blogs calling it a raw, heartfelt triumph. Invitations to Rustage came pouring in, but Ellie's focus was on the wedding. She and Sarah had chosen a small outdoor venue in upstate New York, a meadow surrounded by trees, perfect for their vision of a simple, heartfelt ceremony. They'd planned every detail together: wildflower bouquets, a string quartet, a dance floor under the stars. But the question of Margaret loomed large. One night, Ellie called her father for advice. "She's been asking about you," Tom said. "She's proud, even if she doesn't know how to show it." Ellie's throat tightened. Proud? The word felt foreign, tied to a mother who'd once called her love a mistake. "I don't know if I can trust her," Ellie admitted. Tom sighed. "You don't have to. Just give her a chance to show you who she is now." The next day, Ellie mailed the invitation. It felt like letting go of a breath she'd held for years. She didn't expect a response, but 2 days later, her phone pinged with a text. "I'll be there. Thank you, Eleanor." Ellie stared at the words, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. Sarah, reading over her shoulder, pulled her into a hug. "Whatever happens, we're doing this together," she said. The weeks flew by, filled with final fittings, rehearsals, and late-night talks with Sarah about their future. Ellie's play was scheduled for a second run, this time at a larger theater, and the cast was buzzing with excitement. But Ellie's mind was on the wedding, on the moment she'd stand before Sarah and vow to love her forever. The thought of Margaret watching made her both nervous and defiant. She wanted her mother to see the life she'd built, the love she'd fought for. A few days before the wedding, Ellie and Sarah drove to the venue to check the setup. The meadow was even more beautiful than they'd imagined, with golden sunlight filtering through the trees. They walked hand in hand, laughing as they practiced their vows. "I promise to steal your fries forever," Sarah said, grinning. Ellie laughed, her heart full. For a moment she forgot about Margaret, about the past. This was her future. But that night doubt crept back. Ellie lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining her mother's face in the crowd. Would she smile? Would she leave again? Sarah, sensing her restlessness, rolled over and wrapped her arms around her. "You're enough," Sarah whispered. "You always have been." Ellie clung to those words, letting them anchor her. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and crisp, the air alive with possibility. Ellie woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. Sarah was already up, singing off-key in the kitchen as she made coffee. They dressed together, helping each other with zippers and cufflinks, their laughter easing the tension. Ellie's dress felt like armor, Sarah's suit a declaration of their shared strength. Guests began to arrive, their chatter filling the meadow. Ellie's father was there, beaming with pride, his arm around a friend from Ohio. The cast from the play showed up too, their faces familiar and warm. Ellie scanned the crowd, her heart racing. Then she saw her, Margaret, standing at the edge of the meadow, her face unreadable but her presence undeniable. As the ceremony began, Ellie took her place beside Sarah, their hands clasped tightly. The officiant's words washed over them, but Ellie's eyes kept drifting to her mother. Margaret sat in the back, her hands folded, her expression soft but guarded. When it was time for the vows, Ellie's voice shook but grew stronger with every word. "Sarah, you taught me that love is a home, not a battlefield," she said, tears spilling over. Sarah's vows were fierce and tender, promising to fight for their love no matter what. The crowd cheered as they kissed, the sound drowning out Ellie's doubts. But as they turned to face their guests, Ellie's eyes found Margaret again. Her mother was clapping, slow and deliberate, a tear glistening on her cheek. For the first time, Ellie saw something like pride in her mother's eyes. It wasn't everything, but it was enough for now. The reception unfolded under a canopy of stars, the meadow glowing with fairy lights and laughter. Ellie and Sarah swayed on the dance floor, their first dance as wives to a soft acoustic cover of Can't Help Falling in Love. Ellie's heart felt full, yet her eyes kept drifting to Margaret, who sat at a table near the edge watching quietly. As the night wore on, guests mingled, sharing stories and toasts. Ellie's father raised a glass, his voice thick with emotion. "To Ellie and Sarah, who remind us that love is worth fighting for," he said. The crowd cheered, but Ellie noticed Margaret's hands stay still, her face a mix of awe and discomfort. Ellie wanted to approach her, to demand answers, but Sarah's hand on her arm kept her grounded. "Let her come to you," Sarah whispered. The band switched to an upbeat song, and Sarah pulled Ellie back to the dance floor, their laughter blending with the music. For a moment, Ellie let herself forget the past, losing herself in Sarah's smile, her warmth. Friends from the theater joined them, their energy infectious. Mia, the actress who played Ellie's counterpart, spun Sarah dramatically, earning a round of applause. Ellie felt a surge of gratitude for this chosen family, the ones who'd stood by her when blood ties faltered. As the night quieted, Margaret approached. Ellie tensed, her hand tightening in Sarah's. "Can we talk?" Margaret asked, her voice soft but steady. Ellie nodded and they stepped away from the crowd, finding a quiet corner near the trees. Sarah stayed close, her presence a silent support. "I didn't know if I'd belong here," Margaret began, her eyes on the ground. "Your life, it's so full, so beautiful. I don't fit in it anymore." Ellie's chest ached at the honesty in her mother's voice. "You could have," she said, her words sharp but honest. "You chose to leave." Margaret nodded, her face crumpling. "I was wrong," she said. "I thought I was saving you, saving myself. But I lost you instead." Ellie's throat tightened. She'd waited years for those words, but they didn't erase the pain. "I needed you," she said, her voice breaking. "I was a kid, and you left me to figure it out alone." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she whispered. "I see that now. Your play, your wedding, you've built something I didn't understand back then. I want to understand now." Sarah stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "It's not just about understanding, Mrs. Thompson. It's about showing up, staying, even when it's hard." Margaret looked at Sarah, then back at Ellie. "I want to try," she said. "If you'll let me." Ellie didn't answer right away. The hurt was still there, a scar that might never fade. But she saw something new in her mother's eyes, humility maybe, or a willingness to learn. They returned to the reception, the moment unresolved but lighter. Ellie danced with her father, who whispered, "I'm so proud of you." She hugged Mia and Lena, who'd brought her play to life, and laughed with Sarah as they cut the cake. Margaret stayed until the end, watching from the sidelines, a quiet observer in a world she was only beginning to understand. The next morning, Ellie and Sarah woke in their hotel room, the weight of the wedding still settling. They lay in bed talking about the future, trips they wanted to take, plays Ellie wanted to write, a life they'd build together. But Margaret's presence lingered in Ellie's mind. She wasn't ready to forgive, not fully, but she was open to something new, a cautious step toward healing. A week later, Ellie received a letter from Margaret. It was longer this time, filled with memories of Ellie as a child, apologies for the years lost, and a promise to keep trying. "I'm reading about your world," Margaret wrote. "I'm learning." Ellie read the letter twice, then set it aside. She didn't reply right away, but she kept it in a drawer, a small sign of possibility. Ellie's play was restaged at the larger theater, drawing bigger crowds. She and Sarah attended the opening night, their hands intertwined as they watched the story unfold again. The scene of the mother's rejection hit harder this time, but so did the moments of love and triumph. Ellie glanced at Sarah, her heart swelling. This was her truth, her victory, and no one could take it away. Backstage, the cast celebrated, and Ellie felt a sense of purpose. Her work was reaching people, sparking conversations, maybe even changing minds. She thought of Margaret, of the letter, of the wedding. Healing wasn't linear, she realized. It was messy, slow, but possible. And she had Sarah, her father, her friends, her chosen family to carry her through. As they left the theater, Ellie's phone buzzed. Another text from Margaret. "I'm proud of you." Simple but heavy. Ellie didn't respond, but she smiled just a little. For the first time, she felt like her mother might be part of her story again. Not the whole book, but maybe a chapter. Ellie's life settled into a new rhythm, one where love and work intertwined with the cautious hope of rebuilding with her mother. The success of Light Through Cracks brought opportunities, interviews, invitations to speak at theater panels, even interest from a small production company. But Ellie's heart stayed anchored to Sarah, their shared apartment, and the quiet moments that made life feel whole. Margaret's letters came regularly now, each one a little longer, a little braver. She wrote about her new church, about conversations with friends who challenged her old beliefs, about the guilt that kept her up at night. Ellie read them carefully, sometimes with Sarah, sometimes alone. Each letter felt like a step, but Ellie wasn't ready to run toward her mother just yet. Trust, she'd learned, was earned in small, consistent moments. One afternoon, Ellie and Sarah met Margaret for lunch in Manhattan. The restaurant was bright, with wide windows and the hum of city life outside. Margaret arrived early, her hands nervous as she smoothed her skirt. Ellie noticed the changes. Her mother's hair was looser, her smile less guarded. They talked about safe things at first. Ellie's play, Sarah's job at a nonprofit, the weather. But then Margaret leaned forward, her voice low. "I've been reading about people like you," she said. "About love, about identity. I don't understand it all, but I'm trying." Ellie's heart softened, but she held her ground. "It's not just about reading," she said. "It's about accepting me, all of me, without conditions." Margaret nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know," she said. "I'm not there yet, but I want to be." Sarah reached for Ellie's hand, her presence a quiet reminder of their strength together. The lunch ended with no grand promises, just an agreement to keep meeting, to keep talking. Ellie felt lighter as they left, though the weight of the past still lingered. Sarah, ever the optimist, saw progress. "She's showing up," she said as they walked home. "That's more than she did before." Ellie nodded, but part of her still braced for disappointment. Their first anniversary approached, and Ellie and Sarah planned a quiet celebration. A weekend getaway to a cabin in the Catskills. They packed light, bringing books, a playlist, and each other's company. The cabin was small, with a fireplace and a view of snow-dusted trees. They spent their days hiking, their nights wrapped in blankets, talking about the future. Ellie felt a peace she hadn't known was possible, a certainty that Sarah was her home. But even in that quiet, Margaret's presence lingered. Ellie had invited her to a restaging of the play, a bold move she hadn't fully processed. The night before they returned to the city, Ellie sat by the fire, drafting a new script. This one wasn't about pain or rejection. It was about second chances, about families finding their way back. Sarah read the pages, her eyes bright. "This is beautiful," she said. "It's you, but it's bigger than you." Back in New York, the restaging of Light Through Cracks was a triumph. The theater was packed, the energy electric. Ellie stood in the wings, watching Mia and Lena bring her words to life again. This time, she knew Margaret was in the audience, seated beside her father. When the scene of the mother's rejection played, Ellie held her breath, waiting for Margaret's reaction. She couldn't see her face, but she saw her father's hand reach for Margaret's, a small gesture of support. After the show, Margaret found Ellie in the lobby. Her eyes were red, her voice shaky. "I saw myself up there," she said. "The mother who failed. I don't want to be her anymore." Ellie's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say, but she felt the weight of her mother's words. They weren't an apology, not exactly, but they were a promise to try harder. Sarah joined them, her arm slipping around Ellie's waist. "We're heading to dinner," she said, her tone inviting but firm. "You're welcome to join." Margaret hesitated, then nodded. The three of them sat in a small diner, the conversation slow but genuine. Margaret asked about their anniversary, about Ellie's writing. For the first time, Ellie felt like her mother was seeing her, not as a problem to fix, but as a daughter to know. As winter turned to spring, Ellie and Sarah settled into married life. They adopted a cat, painted their apartment, and dreamed of starting a family someday. Margaret's letters continued, each one a small bridge between past and present. Ellie began to reply, short notes at first, then longer ones, sharing pieces of her life. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The play toured to a few small theaters, each performance a reminder of how far Ellie had come. She thought of the girl she'd been at 18, scared and alone, and marveled at the woman she'd become. With Sarah by her side, she'd built a life that was hers, unapologetically. And with Margaret trying, however imperfectly, Ellie felt a spark of hope that their story wasn't over. Spring bloomed in New York, the city alive with color and possibility. Ellie and Sarah walked hand in hand through Central Park, their cat's name Luna, fresh on their lips as they laughed about her latest antics. Life felt full, but Margaret's presence was a quiet undercurrent, a thread Ellie was still learning to weave into her story. Margaret had attended 3 more performances of Light Through Cracks, each time sitting closer to the stage. After the last one, she'd waited in the lobby, a small gift in her hands, a journal with a note, "For your next story." Ellie had taken it, her fingers brushing her mother's, and felt a shift. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was progress. They'd started meeting monthly, always with Sarah, always on neutral ground. Each conversation chipped away at the distance, though the past still lingered like a shadow. One evening, Ellie received an email from a theater in Chicago, inviting her to workshop a new play. The idea thrilled her, but it meant time away from Sarah, from home. They talked it over late into the night, Sarah's support unwavering. "Go write your heart out," she said, kissing Ellie's forehead. "I'll be here, stealing your hoodies." Ellie laughed, her love for Sarah a steady flame. Before leaving for Chicago, Ellie met Margaret one last time. They sat in a quiet cafe, the kind where the barista knew your order by heart. Margaret looked different now, less rigid, her smile almost natural. "I'm proud of you, Eleanor," she said, her voice steady. "Not just for your play, but for who you are." Ellie's eyes stung. She wanted to believe her mother, but part of her still waited for the other shoe to drop. "I've been talking to a counselor," Margaret continued, surprising Ellie, "about what I did, about why I left. I was scared, not just of you, but of what I didn't understand." Ellie listened, her heart caught between pain and hope. "I don't expect you to trust me yet," Margaret said. "But I'm here, and I'm not leaving again." For the first time, Ellie felt those words might be true. In Chicago, Ellie threw herself into her work, the new play taking shape. It was about second chances, about families rebuilding after breaking. She wrote late into the night, her thoughts drifting to Sarah, to her father, to Margaret. She called Sarah daily, their conversations a lifeline across the miles. "Luna misses you," Sarah teased, her voice warm through the phone. And I might too. When Ellie returned, Sarah was waiting at the airport, her grin brighter than the city lights. They drove home, singing along to the radio, and Ellie felt whole again. That night she showed Sarah the new script, her hands nervous. Sarah read it in one sitting, tears in her eyes. "This is us," she said. "It's everyone who's ever had to fight for love." Ellie kissed her, knowing she'd found her forever. Margaret invited them to Ohio for a weekend, a tentative step toward family. Ellie hesitated, but Sarah encouraged her. "Let's see what it could be," she said. They arrived to find Margaret's house changed. Photos of Ellie as a child now shared space with newer ones, including a framed picture from the wedding. Ellie's throat tightened. It was small, but it mattered. The weekend was quiet, filled with walks, meals, and careful conversations. Margaret asked about Chicago, about Sarah's work, about their dreams. She listened, really listened, and Ellie saw glimpses of the mother she'd once known. On the last day, Margaret pulled Ellie aside. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, "but I'm grateful for every moment you give me." Ellie nodded, unable to speak. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she was ready to try. Back in New York, Ellie's new play premiered to a sold-out crowd. Sarah sat in the front row, her pride radiant. Margaret was there too, beside Ellie's father, her applause steady and genuine. The play ended with a scene of reconciliation, not perfect but possible. The audience stood, their cheers a wave of validation. Ellie took her bow, her eyes finding Sarah, then Margaret. For the first time, she felt they could all be part of her story. Years later, Ellie would look back on this time as the moment she learned to hold both love and pain. She and Sarah built a life, adopting Luna's successor, writing plays, traveling the world. Margaret became a quiet presence, never central but always there, learning to love her daughter without conditions. Ellie's plays continued to touch hearts, each one a testament to resilience, to love that refused to break. As she stood on stage one night years later accepting an award for her work, Ellie looked out at the crowd. Sarah was there, her smile a beacon. Margaret was there too, her eyes bright with pride. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was theirs. And in that moment, Ellie knew she'd written not just a play, but a life worth living.